Good morning. Going to talk a little bit about the theory of natural selection and the evolution of land plants a little bit. So, first thing is, what is evolution? Evolution can mean two different things. It could mean that you are coming from a common ancestor, and it can also mean that it's just a change in the genotypic frequency over a period of time. So it can be both things. Charles Darwin, my guess is you've heard of him. I'm not sure how much you've actually studied him. I know now with the EOCs, we don't do much on evolution and natural selection because it's not really in the course level expectations anymore in the standards. So you may or may not have gotten very much information about Charles Darwin at this point. So he actually was going to be a doctor. He didn't have any intention of doing all this research. He just wanted to be a doctor. But then when he got to, it was kind of funny, once he got to med school, he realized that he didn't like surgery. Kind of a necessity if you're going to be a physician, to be able to go through. So he decided to switch his majors, and he went to Cambridge to be a pastor. So kind of just in the opposite direction. In 1831 is when he graduated from Cambridge. He then went under the mentorship of John Henslow, and then quite possibly one of the biggest things that had an effect on Darwin was that a Captain Robert Fitzroy had made just a kind of general announcement that said that anybody that was interested in coming aboard his ship, the HMS Beagle, to accompany him, just to kind of travel and see the world, could come. And so Charles Darwin decided to accompany Captain Fitzroy on the HMS Beagle for a 5-year journey. And one of the places that they stopped was the Galapagos Islands. It was on these Galapagos Islands that Charles Darwin first noticed some similarities between the tortoises and the turtles. So there's actually several different Galapagos Islands. They're very close together, but far enough away that these turtles probably would not have been able to swim that far. And each island had a different species of turtle. Now, they were all somewhat, they had some features similar, but they were very much different. And so he came up with this idea that some of these individuals had to have gone through an evolution or a change in their DNA, through their genes. And so he ended up writing this book called On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. It was published in 1859. Another individual by the name of Alfred Russel Wallace came to the same conclusions as Darwin. However, Darwin was able to publish and present his book first. But he was able to use his experiences on the HMS Beagle and from the Galapagos Islands, to kind of give a real world explanation as to how or why these organisms changed. If you're ever interested in reading the book, I actually do have it. I had to get it for a class, so it's not actually very long. It's actually kind of a short book, but yeah, I have it. Side note, but so he used this theory to, and it's a theory, it's not a law, so it's got some data to back it up, but it hasn't reached law status yet. And it probably never will. Most of the theories tend to be more controversial in nature, like the theory of the Big Bang Theory. So, but basically, he used natural selection and evolution to explain the similarities as well as the diversities of all of those organisms on Earth, both in the present as well as in the past. So, what natural selection is, it's basically just the natural variation within it. It explains why there's a natural variation within a population. It explains why some individuals have certain genetic traits or adaptations that have developed that allow them to survive, or that allow, when we say compete, basically that just means to stay alive. Now these variations come about as mutations, and then if a mutation is a favorable one, let's say it turns your coat color into a different color, but it allows you to camouflage yourself better from predators, then the idea is that you will survive to pass on your good coat color trait to the next generation, and eventually all of the ones with maybe not so great coat colors will not survive to pass on those traits. So that's kind of the idea of natural selection, that nature selects what traits are best. Yeah, oftentimes you hear it as survival of the fittest. Yeah, it's kind of it, but it's really a shortened, not quite so accurate depiction. So, another characteristic here is overpopulation. And this is mostly out in nature, not necessarily applying to humans anymore, although it used to be before modern medicine. For every species they're going to produce way more offspring than can possibly survive, because the idea is that nature is going to select the weaker ones, and those individuals will die. So you don't want your genes to die out, so you produce as many offspring as possible to ensure that at least a couple of your genes will survive to be passed on in later generations. So, kind of already talked about this next bullet, that how the environment puts the pressure on the organisms. The environment is going to select which traits are better. So, and then, like I said, the idea is that the organisms with the best traits survive to pass on those traits to their offspring. So then, due to nature selecting what traits are best, and organisms with quote unquote better traits are going to be able to survive, you're going to then see a change in the populations over time. And it's very important to note that it's the population that changes, not the individual. Yes, the individual probably gets the different trait, but as a whole population is going to change over time, not the individual. Not the individual organism. So, okay, microevolution. We're going to talk a little bit about microevolution and macroevolution. So, macroevolution, this occurs when populations are changing over just a couple of generations, not over a long like geological era. So we can actually see these in our lifetime. We can see microevolution in your lifetime. When we talk about macroevolution, you can't see that because it requires, we're talking like millions of years. So, something. Good morning. So something that you can do, you can see, is antibiotic-resistant bacteria. The MRSA, for example, we didn't used to have this methicillin-resistant staph, so we've been able to see that occur. So that's an example of macroevolution or microevolution, but it also is showing you that the bacteria that were able to be resistant to those drugs survived to pass on those traits to their offspring. So nature selected which ones were better, quote unquote. And then you've also got your organisms that are resistant to pesticides. They're going to survive and pass on that gene of antibiotic resistance to their offspring. So that's microevolution for you. Okay, so macroevolution. Oops. Sorry, turning pages. This is going to be a change in a population over a long period of time, over geological eras. And in your packet of fun, I mean, this is like a legit packet, I think it's page 89. This is the list of geological eras. I'm not sure how much experience you have with studying the geological eras, but we're talking millions of years, hundreds of millions of years here to go through macroevolution. So we obviously will not see these in our lifetime. So, with these guys, you're looking at populations giving rise to new species because of those differences, because of those changes in the DNA, they give rise to a different species. So we have evidence of this in our fossil record. You can see the different layers, which is the strata. You can look at when the fossils and the rocks were deposited. That will tell you approximately how long it's taken, the age of everything. And it's important to note that our fossil record is incomplete due to the nature of the plate tectonics. At the subduction zones, where one plate is going beneath another, we're going to be destroying crust. And with that, we're also going to be destroying fossils. So we don't actually have a complete record. of the fossils. So another example of macroevolution is going to be your homologous structures, things that look similar structurally but may have a different purpose. So birds and humans, we have the same structure in our arms, but obviously we don't fly. Our arms are not built to fly. So the birds have longer, what we would call phalanges, that go down through, I guess I'm thinking bats really, that go down through their wings. And our fingers obviously don't have webbing. So that basically indicates that at some point there should have been a common ancestor. It's important to note that common ancestor does not mean that you derive from a particular group. So then you've got molecular biology, just the similarities in DNA sequences, RNA sequences, similarities in proteins within our cells, like the sequence of amino acids. So the only way for that to happen is really to have a common ancestor. So, like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that we came from, that any species came from another one. It means that at some point there was a common ancestor. So now we've got the presence of vestigial structures. These are going to be structures that we have, but we don't really have a function for them anymore. So they don't really seem to serve a purpose. So tailbones, for example, don't really have a purpose. What are those things called in the back of your mouth? Wisdom teeth. There we go. Wisdom teeth. So then you've also got the presence of your regulatory genes, the homeobox. There's certain similarities between populations with those as well. So there's some significant data out there that suggests that there are that there's some similarities between different species that to suggest that they once had a common ancestor. So okay, last one, which is going to be plant evolution. So plant evolution, just like oh, my brain's not functioning very well this morning. Just like the macroevolution, there we go, is going to occur over geological time. So the idea is there was a green algal ancestor to all the land plants. There's a lot of similarity today between the land plants and the algae. There's a lot of similarity between the two. So the idea is that at some point they all had to have had a common ancestor of sorts. So as they creeped up onto the land, if you will, the idea is that they had to develop a couple of things to survive. So there had to be a couple of things that they had to develop to be able to compete and stay alive. one of which is they had to develop this waxy cuticle. The cuticle is going to allow them to retain moisture to minimize the amount of water lost. So, another thing that they would have had to have developed would be a root. Since they're no longer in the water, they have to develop structures that are going to allow them to take in water. So, or root-like organs, since not all plants have true roots. So, your non-vascular plants don't typically produce what we would consider true roots, but they're root-like structures. So, they're also going to need to develop the vascular tissue for the conduction. Again, they're going to need that for water transportation, to move that water up and down their stem. And then they're going to need some support tissues because they're not being supported by the water around them. And then they're going to need to develop reproductive mechanisms that are going to work successfully in a terrestrial environment, not an aquatic environment. So those are some of the stipulations that plants have had to overcome as they have creeped upon the land. So we'll take a second now and look at your packet of fun here. Page 84 is just kind of showing you where the HMS Beagle went. As Darwin traveled kind of around the world and saw some sights. There are some, if you keep flipping, there's some more. It's on artificial selection, so that human beings select certain traits like in cattle, sheep, horses, dogs even. So there's a little bit more about Dalton and Alfred Russel Wallace and how they both came to the idea of natural selection on their own. A little bit more on just inheritance through some plants on page 86. Talking about the regulatory genes, specifically the homeobox on page 87. Page 88 is looking at just kind of historically in the fossil record, how long we've been able to see or find certain fossils in the fossil record. I've already looked at 89, which is those geological eras. So it might not be a bad idea just for you to look through at least the geological eras. I have no idea if and when you'll ever be tested on those. Who knows? But then, if you look at yesterday's packet of stuff that I also gave you, the first one is the first page on page 80 is looking at the Whitaker version of your 5 kingdom classification, the Monera, fungi, Plantae, Animalia, and Protista. So just kind of, it's not a very good copy, but kind of grainy, but it'll do. And then you've got the WOS domains below it. So technically, okay, I'll flip again. So this kind of ties in nicely. If you look at all of those, they call them nodes where they start to branch off. They are pointing to what's believed to be a common ancestor. So they believe that there is a common ancestor between domain bacteria and domain eukarya. And then they branched off and became 2 completely different groups. And then at some point, domain archaea and domain eukarya, split off. So the tree of life is what we call it. So it's obviously not complete, but each little node there, a fork, if you will, is just signifying that there should be a common ancestor there. So hopefully this makes some sense. If it doesn't, please don't hesitate to ask. any questions that you might have. Like I said, test here on Friday. I'll give you the study guide tomorrow to kind of look over, and final here in a week from Friday. So have a good day.